In this video, I'll be showing you how to add time tracking to your Notion to-do list. So this is the template that I'm going to be showing you how to build today. So as you can see on this status card here, it shows how much time you've spent on all of your tasks so far that day. And down here is the actual to-do list, and we have these buttons here that allow you to start and end your task. So the way this works is when you start your task, you simply click the Start Task button and the progress will then change to in progress. And when you finish the task, you'll then click the End Task button and that will change the status to done, which is why it's disappeared, and you'll then find it on the Complete tab here, and it will also show how long the task took you to complete. And just before we jump into the tutorial, I just want to mention that this entire template is available on my store. So if you just want to grab the finished template and start using it straight away without building it yourself, then just head over to my store. I'll leave the link in the description box and you can just grab this template. It does also have a few extra features as well that I won't be showing you how to build in the video, including this project section and some quick action buttons. So as I said, this will be linked below if you just want to grab it. So this is part 2 of a mini series. So in part 1, we actually built this entire to-do list system. So if you want to see how we built this from scratch, then check out video 1. I will link it in the description box. Otherwise, in this video, we're going to be adding the time tracking features. You can also add the time tracking features to an existing to-do list. If you already have one, that's absolutely fine. You'll be able to apply this to any to-do list. So we're going to start down here in the task database, and the first thing I'm going to do is just add another table view of this database because it's a little bit easier to work with when you're setting up formulas and things like that. So what we're going to do is just click on this plus symbol here, and that's going to automatically just add a table view. I'm just going to leave it as table and just click done. So all this is doing is just bringing up all of the properties that we added into the table just so that I can see everything, and right at the end we can just remove this view, but it's a bit easier to work with. And the first thing we're going to do is add another property, and that's going to be our start time property so that we can label when the start time for the task is. So we're just going to scroll along here and click on this plus symbol to grab a new property, and we're going to grab a date property. Now I'm just going to call this one start time, and that's all we're going to do. We're then going to add another very similar property. So I'm going to click on here, type in date, and this one is going to be our end time property. So these properties are how we're going to actually track how long each task takes to complete. We're going to input a start date and time and an end date and time, and then we can work out the difference between the two, which will tell us exactly how long the task took to complete. Now to automate this and make it a little bit easier, we can actually add buttons. So rather than having to click on here and selecting the start time and date, what we can do is actually add a button that will automatically add it for us. So what we're going to do is click on the plus symbol here and type in button, and we're going to grab this button property. So we're going to call the button start task, and those words are actually going to display on the button. And then we're actually going to say what we want the action to be when the button is clicked. So we're going to click add an action. So what we actually want it to do is edit our start time property to add the current date and time. So over here you're going to see all of the properties that we have within the table. So we're going to click on start time, and then it's going to ask us what we want to set the start time to. So luckily Notion does allow you to select either the today or the now option. Now the one we're going to go with is now, and the only difference between these two is that today will just populate today's date, whereas now will populate today's date and time. Now it's really important that we have the time in there because most of these tasks are going to be within the same day. So we're going to go with now. So essentially when the button is clicked, the start time property is going to be populated with now's time. We're also going to add one other step. So I'm going to click on here, and what we actually want to do is simply just change the status property to in progress. So that's just another handy little thing that we can add inside of this button to save us a little bit of time. And that's all we're going to do. So this is what it should look like. Let's now click on the X, and now I'm going to show you how the button works. So let's click the start task button for the top task here. So once I click that button, as you can see, today's date and time has been populated into this box. So now we're going to add one more button, and it's going to be the end task button, and that will populate this box with the end time. So we're going to click on here to add a new property, and it's going to be another button property. Let's call this button end task like this, and we're going to add an action so that we can say what we want the button to do when it's clicked. Now in this case we actually want the end time to be set, so we're going to click on that property, and again we're going to select now so that it populates it with now's date and time. We're also going to add one other step like the previous button, and we're going to change the status, and this time we're going to set it to done so that when the task is finished you click this button, it fills in the end time, and it also changes the status automatically for you, which will save you a bit of time time. So that's all we're going to do. So let's check that this works. So here is our end time property. So when I click end task, it simply populates this box with the end time, and it took me 1 minute to create those buttons, which is quite nice. So now that we can see when we started and when we finished this task, we now want to work out the time that it took us. So I'm just going to manually change one of these. So you can actually override this if you ever click the buttons at the wrong time. So let's just change this one by an hour to 11:42. So this task would have took us an hour and 1 minute to complete. So now we're going to add a formula property that's going to work out the time difference between these two properties so we can see easily how long it actually took us to complete the task. So we're going to add another property onto this table, and it's going to be a formula property. And let's just call this one time taken. And you then just want to click on this formula edit button here to bring up the panel, and we're going to write in our formula here. Now the function that we're going to use is the date between function. So you just want to type in date between like this, and you should see it appear here in the sidebar. So I'm going to select that. So as you can see here, the date between function returns the difference between two dates. Now the date can be exactly the same. There could just be a difference in time. So in this case, the difference between these two dates is an hour and 1 minute. And as you can see here, it does allow you to set the units to many different things. It could be years, quarters, months, weeks, days, hours, or minutes. So in this case, we're going to use minutes as our unit, which just means that we're going to tell the date between function to work out the difference between these two dates in minutes, because that would work best for this type of task. So the first thing that you need to tell the date between function is the two dates that you want it to work out the difference between. So the first one we're going to add is going to be our end time property. Now if you actually look down here in the sidebar, you'll see all of the different properties that we've added into the table. So you're going to look for the end time property and select that, and it will add it into the formula. We're then going to add a comma, and now we need to input the second date, which is going to be the start time property. So I'm going to add that one as well. Another comma, and finally we just need to tell it which units we want it to use so that it knows what to work out the difference between these in. So we want minutes, so inside two quotation marks like this, you're just going to write the word minutes. So that is the function. So I'm going to click done. And I'm just realizing that I've set the start time to 11:42 p.m. rather than a.m. So let me just update that to a.m. Okay, and now that I've done that, as you can see, the time taken in minutes is 61, which makes sense because it is an hour and 1 minute. So we've now successfully added a formula that is working out how long this task took us. Now, I also think that it'd be useful if the time the task took would display on this complete tab that we set up here. So you can just look at the tasks that you've completed, and it would display alongside how long each task took. Now, currently, our time taken formula displays in minutes, but I'd rather it display in minutes if it's less than an hour, but if it's over an hour, it would be displayed in hours, because I think that would be an easier format to understand. Now we can use another formula to do that. Now I also want to give a quick little shout out to Daniel, who commented this super useful formula on my last time tracker video. We are going to be using a really similar formula in this video. So to convert this time taken into hours and minutes, we're going to add another formula. So I'm going to click on here and type in formula, and I'm going to call this one time taken plus label. As it's going to have a label, it will say something like 1 hour and 2 minutes. So that's why we're adding the label here. And we're going to click on formula edit to actually write in our formula. Now we're going to start by using an if function so that we can say if the time is less than an hour, we want it to display in minutes, and if it's more than an hour, it should display an hour in minutes. So that's why we're adding the if function in here, and we're going to open a parentheses. And I'm also just going to hold down shift and hit enter to go to the next line, just to make it a little bit easier to read. Now the condition that we want to check is going to be if the time taken here is less than 60, because that indicates that it's less than an hour. So we're just going to write a little statement in here so that we can check if the time is less than 60. So the first thing we're going to do is add in our time taken property. So if you have a look down in the sidebar, just look until you find the time taken formula, and we're going to add that into this formula. We then want to check if that's less than 60, therefore it's less than an hour, add a comma, and then we need to tell the formula what we want it to display if this condition is true. So if the time taken is less than 60, as I said, we want to display this time here in minutes. So we're simply just going to add the number here because this is already in minutes. So we're going to add our time taken again, and that's simply just going to display whatever number we have in our time taken formula, a plus symbol, and we can actually just write the text that we want to display after this property. So inside two quotation marks, I just want it to say min for minutes, like that. and that is fine. So if this is 60, it'll say 60 min. If it's 35, it'll say 35 min. But if it's 61 or anything else above 60, it's going to follow the next rule that we're going to add now. So you want to add a comma, and then we can tell the formula what we want it to display if this condition here isn't true. So therefore, if it's more than 60, what do we want the formula to display? So as I said earlier, we want it to display in hours and minutes, but we're going to have to do a little bit of fancy formula work to make it display correctly. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to divide our time taken number here by 60. So I'm going to look here again for time taken and add that in, and we're going to divide it by 60. And what that's going to do is going to convert the minutes here into hours. So if you had 120 minutes and you divided that by 60, you would get 2, and that's correct because you have 2 hours. But the only problem with this is if you have something like 90 and you divide that by 60, you'll get 1.5 because it's 1.5 hours. But I don't want to display 1.5 hours because it's a little bit confusing. I actually want it to display 1 hour and 30 minutes. So what we're going to do to make that work is we're firstly going to floor this number. So what we're going to do is you're just going to write the word floor at the start and open a parentheses. Now what this floor function does is it essentially just rounds the number down to the nearest number. So it's really similar to a round function, but it would always round it down. So if it was 1.2, it would be rounded to 1. If it was 1.5, it would also be rounded to 1. If it was 1.99, it would also be rounded to 1. That is how the floor function works. So the reason we're doing this is because no matter what the number is here, it's always going to round it down to the nearest hour, and we can then add another little extra bit of formula here to work out the remaining minutes. But for now, we just want the hour so that we can write 1 hour or 2 hours, and then after we can add something like and 25 minutes. So this is essentially just giving us the hours that the task took. So I'm going to add another parentheses here at the end, and then we just need to add the text that we want to display after this number. So inside 2 quotation marks like this, I'm just going to add an H for hour, and we also want to add a space on either side because with Notion formulas they don't add spaces, so you do need to add the spaces yourself. And then we want to add the remaining minutes. So if it was 1 hour and 30 minutes, I want it to say 1 hour here and 30 minutes. So to get the minutes, we're going to use the mod function. So if you just type in mod like this. Now what mod does is it actually divides 2 numbers and then it returns the remainder. So if we did the mod of 3 and 2, the remainder would be 1 because 2 goes into 3 once, and we then have a remainder of 1. Now we can actually use this function to return the remaining minutes that the task took, as we already have the hour here using floor. So we're simply just going to do the mod, and we're going to open a parentheses, and we're going to add our time taken formula in once again. We're going to add a comma, and we need to give the formula a number to divide the first number by. So in this case, it's going to be 60 once again, because we want to see how many times 60 goes into this number, and then this function is then just going to work out the remainder. So for 61, which is the number we currently have for time taken, the number 60 goes into this once, and there is a remainder of 1 because it's 61. And we're then going to close the parentheses, and then finally we just need to add the text that we want to display afterwards. So I'm going to add, and we're going to do 2 quotation marks, and inside here we're going to do a space and then min. So after whatever this number returns, it will say min for minutes. And we just need to then close off the parentheses. Okay, so let's click done. So the time taken for this task was 61 minutes, and as you can see here, it's correctly working out that that is 1 hour and 1 minute. So now that we have this formula, let's add it onto our complete tab so that will display next to all of the completed tabs. So we can simply just click on the 3 dots here and go into properties, and the one that we want to show is going to be our time taken with the label. So I'm just going to unhide it so it displays here on the list. And as you can see, it's now displaying here on the list. Now I haven't actually filled out the start and end times for the rest of the tasks, so I'll just do that quickly. So I just added some start and end times for these tasks, and as you can see, this is now what it will look like on our complete tab. One other thing I did is I just opened this up. You can also rearrange the properties on the pages just to make it a little bit easier to understand. So you can just easily drag and drop them like this. And we can also hide this one because we don't need to see it. So I'm just going to set the property visibility to hide. So the only properties that you're going to see on here are the ones that you need to see, and all of those other properties that are just working in the background are hidden. So now that we have this property, the next next thing that we want to do is we actually want to add the time that each task has taken to our statistics database up here so that we can see in total how much time we've worked today. So firstly, we need a way of calculating the total time that has been worked today. So we're going to head back over to our table tab and we're going to add another formula that's going to check if the task is today, because that's the first condition that we'll want to check. And if it is, then we're going to add the time that the task took to a total, which will display on this card. So we're going to use a formula property to do that. So I'm going to click on here and type in formula and select this property. So I'm going to call this one today plus time, because we're going to check if the date is today, and if it is, we're going to display the time that the task took. So essentially it's a formula that is going to only display the time if the task is due today. So let's click on formula edit to write in our formula. So we're going to use another if function because we want to check a condition, and if that condition is true, we're going to display one result, and if it's false, then we will display something else. So the condition that we actually want to check is if the due date is today, because we only want to add the time that the task took to our statistics if it is a task that took place today. So we're going to start by checking if the due date, so we're going to select the due from the property list, and we're going to check if it's equal to today. And if you watch the first video, you'll know that we use this today function a few times, and this just essentially pulls through today's date, so we can easily now compare if the due date is equal to today's date. And this is a dynamic property, so it'll change every day depending on the actual date. We're then going to add a comma, and now we're going to tell the formula what we want to display if this condition is true. So if the due date is today, then we just want to display the time taken so that we can add that all together at the end. So I'm simply just going to find our time taken property here. So this is the one you want to select and not the one with the label, because this one is actually a number that can be added together, but the one with the labels, it's not going to be possible to add them together. So make sure you click the time taken property. So it's simply just going to pull through this number. We're then going to add a comma, and then we need to tell the formula what we want it to display if this condition isn't true. So in that case, we just want to add the number 0, because I don't want it to be adding any time into our statistics database if the task isn't data today. So we just want it to display 0 if it's not today's task. And we're then just going to close off this function with another parentheses, and let's click done. So as you can see here, some of these are blank, whereas some of them have numbers. So let me just scroll down here. What I'm actually going to do is, so this is the actual task and due date. Let's just move the due date here, and let's also just move the status property here as well. And I'm just going to click on here, and we're just going to freeze up until that column so that this all stays in place. Let's just scroll again to this side to see this property. So as you can see, there is a time displaying for a few of these, but a couple of them are blank. Now the ones that are blank are the ones that haven't been completed yet, so therefore there's no time to display. But for the ones that are done, there is a time displaying. Let me just change the date to double check that it works. If I change the date to yesterday, as you can see, it changes to 0. If I change it to tomorrow, it's 0. It's only going to display the time if the date is today. So that is working correctly. So now that we have this property that is only going to display the time if the task was completed today, we simply just want to add all of these numbers together to get a total amount of time, and that should display up here in the stats database. So to do that, we're going to use a roll up in this database. So I'm going to click on this card to bring up the properties in this database. So we simply just want to pull through all of that data from the task database and add it together in here. So what we're going to do is add a roll up property, and roll ups essentially just grab data from other databases. So I'm going to click on here to add another property, and you want to look for a roll up. And I'm going to call this one total time. Now the first thing that you need to do is select a relation. So this is essentially just selecting which database you want to grab the data from. Now in this case, we only have a relation property with the tasks database. We set that up in the first video. So that's the one we're going to select, because I need to select the data from the tasks database. It's then going to ask you which property you want to grab. So the one that we want to grab is going to be the today plus time property. That's the one we just created that displays the time if the task is due today. And then it's going to ask us what we want to calculate. So we can actually just calculate the sum. So if you go to statistics and select sum, it's simply just going to add all of those numbers together. So let's just click back here now and see what it says. So next to total time, it's saying 363, which sounds about right given the numbers that we had. Similar to earlier, I think it would be easier to understand if rather than minutes, it was displayed as hours and minutes. So we're going to add another formula to convert it, just like we did in the other database. So we're going to add one more property, and again, it's going to be a formula. And let's just call this one today's total time. And we're going to click on formula edit to add the formula. Now this formula is very, very similar to the other formula that we used in the other database, so I'm just going to run through it quite quickly. So we're going to start by adding our if function, and we firstly want to check if the total time property, which was the one that was adding together all of the times from the other database, we want to check if that is less than 60 minutes so that we can display the total time in minutes if it is. So the one we're going to select is the total time property, and we want to check if that is less than 60, add a comma, and then we need to state what we want it to display if it is less than 60. So we're going to add the total time property to display the number of minutes, add, and just the text that we want to write in here is space min for minutes, and we're going to add a comma. We're then going to hit Shift and Enter to go to the next line. And then we need to write what we want it to do if this isn't true. So if it is over 60, then we want to display the total time in hours and minutes. So just like we did earlier, we're going to use that floor function, open parentheses, and we're going to add in our total time property. We then need to divide this by 60. I'm then going to close the parentheses. We then need to add the text that we want to display. So if you remember, this displays the hour number. So after that, we want to, inside two quotation marks, just write a H like this. So just an H for hour is displayed after the time. We then want to add the minutes after that. So if you remember the minutes, we use the mod function just to get the remainder, which is just the remaining minutes. Open parentheses. We want to grab our total time property, and the number we want to divide it by again is going to be 60, and that is just going to give us the remainder, so aka the remaining minutes. We're going to close the parentheses, and finally we just need to add a little bit of text that is going to display after, and it's going to be a space and min like this, and we just need to close that off at the end. So I did go through that quite quick just because we did already go over it in detail earlier. The only other thing that we want to do here is I want a little bit more text, so I actually wanted to say total time at the start and then display the total time here. So I'm just going to place my cursor right at the start, hold down Shift and hit Enter, and right at the top here I can actually add in a little bit of text that we want to display. So inside two quotation marks like this, let's just write the words total time and a colon and a space. Don't forget to add the space here, and then I just need to add a plus here so that this is displayed before this entire number. And I also think it would be nice if this would display in green text rather than black. So firstly, I'm just gonna add a parentheses right at the start and one right at the end, just to isolate this entire thing so that I can add some styling to the whole thing. And then right at the end, we're going to use the style function. So if you just type in .style like this, open a parentheses, we can then give some instructions on how we want this text to display. So firstly, let's bold the text. So you can do that by adding two quotation marks and a B inside. So this just means bold. You can then add a comma, and I also want the text to be green. So inside two quotation marks, let's just write the word green, and that's just going to tell the formula that we want the text to be green. You can then just close the parentheses. There's many other different styling options. If you actually have a look down here, it will display all the different types of things that you can do. You can also add code styling, which looks quite cool as well. Let's just start with this for now. So if I click done, as you can see, this is what it displays as. So it's adding all of that together and displaying it in the hours and minutes format. If you did want it in code styling, I'll just show you briefly what that looks like. So you just can add one more comma here, and if you just add a C inside two quotation marks like that, as you can see here, is going to add code styling, which looks like this. So it's completely up to you the sort of style that you want. I'm just going to leave it as normal text, but if you want it like this with the background, then you can add the code styling. But I'm just removing that for now. So now that we have this property all set up, let's just go back now onto this page, and we just want to add that onto the card. So to do that, I'm going to click on the three dots here, select properties, and it is the today's total time property. So I'm just going to unhide that, and it's just going to add it there onto the card. Now that we've added all of the properties that we need, you can delete this table view here. It was just an alternate view, so it won't delete any of the properties. So I'm just going to click on here and delete it just to clean this up a little bit. And we also just want to add the buttons onto the today cards as well, so that you can click them straight from the card. So we're going to click on the three dots here, select properties, and you just want to show the start task and the end task button like that. And let's also just move them above the status like this. So let's just check that this works correctly. So when I start the task, I will simply click the start task button, and that will change the status to in progress. And once I've finished the task, I click end task, it disappears from the list. This has changed to 5 out of 6 tasks complete. And if I check on here it is displaying on our complete task with 0 minutes because I clicked them straight after each other, but I can come on here and just change the time like this. And as you can see, it's now displaying an hour and it's added that onto our total. So that's it. Remember, if you do want to grab the completed template without having to build it yourself, then that is available on my store. And I did also add a couple of extras like these quick action buttons and a really useful projects database as well. And you can actually connect the tasks within the to-do list to the projects and see your progress on here. I also added a handy little overdue alert as well. So if you are interested in grabbing the complete template, I will leave a link in the description box below. And if you did find this video useful, then I'd really appreciate if you could give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel as I post new Notion tutorials like this one every week.